All right, welcome back. We're at a great Tuesday morning. Back with the Prospect Podcast. I have myself here. I'm in the middle today. We never know in the roulette of when we do the portrait version where we'll end up. Derek is on top today, and our guest, Coach Michael Fahey's on the bottom. We're gonna talk some strength and conditioning, but we're also some speed development. A little West Side Barbell, and I'll talk about what we're talking there in a second. But I also really, and he has it on his shirt there, the OVR um, testing, I guess technology might be the way to put it, but it's really innovative, and it's really interesting because I've been diving into it. I'll give a little quick background, obviously because of Simply Faster and um, Tony Holler and Sprint Based Football. I've come familiar with a lot of the stuff that your stuff is on their page, the Simply Faster page, and uh, I go down deep, coach, down the rabbit hole of these things. And so I looked at it, and OVR was one. Actually, last week I almost purchased it. I'm probably going to purchase the coaches package this week because I was looking for something that did a good amount of the majority of what I'm looking to accomplish testing wise within strength. You know, the ability obviously to move the weights and figure out how much uh, I guess power they're generating from the ground. Um, Explosion with the testing for the vertical and those kind of things, and then the speed portion of it, right? Because everybody has like one here and one thing here, and not all, but you actually have all three of those things. The only thing you don't have yet, which you probably will have soon, I'm sure you're going to tell me, is obviously the GPS stuff, which is the only other thing that I'm probably looking for at this point. And but there's a lot of great technology associated with that stuff. So I can't wait to dive into the OVR stuff. To describe Coach is probably to call him a renaissance man within the strength and conditioning space because and I don't want to limit him just to strength conditioning because he's obviously does a lot more. But that's my best way I could put it. I mean, he's been a director. If you guys watch West Side Barbell versus the World, which is a great documentary, I watched it. It's really eye opening with respect to strength development and how that became a prominent thing with respect to West Side Barbell and some of the guys that came out of there. And he obviously was involved in that. And then also everything from being a strength and conditioning coach at Florida High, working actually with high school athletes, training them, from football players to track and field athletes. He's trained a long jumper that's gone 25-5. I mean, a wide variety of different things. And obviously now producing the technology, which I'm going to bend his ear offline because this is a space that I think is really rapidly growing, especially with AI and the things that can start. You're probably in the early phases, right? First phases of what you're doing in OVR are great, but you're probably your mind's already going to what more can I do, and what more can I develop. So with that, that's the long and the short of it. He really is a guy that's going to be able to talk about a variety of different topics with us. So we're really excited to have Michael Fahey on today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Mike, tell me what I missed here. So, dive into some of the stuff that I did miss because you really have a varied background and and really have accomplished a lot of great things. Talk about kind of your genesis of your career and then how you even got to start in developing OVR.
Yeah. Everything for me is like the same thing. So it looks different to sort of from the outside, but I lean really heavily just sort of into my own story. So I grew up in Tallahassee, Florida. That's where I've moved back to now. Been back for about 6 or 7 years. I was a football player growing up. My dad played football at Princeton. My dad was a stockbroker who was just super into strength and conditioning himself. So we always had like a crew of kids and, athletes of all ages who would come, just train in our garage. At one point we had, a 5-star #1 prospect in the country training in our garage, went on to become a top 10 draft pick. And so my dad's weird passions and obsessions kind of just got passed down on to me. They were presented as sort of so normalized to me that I didn't really understand until much later how like unique that really was. I learned about West Side, and I was, reading Powerlifting USA and watching the old VHS tapes and stuff all the way back in the 90s and the early 2000s. That would just be like what we did. We come home from, me and 3 or 4 guys would come home from school in the off season, open up an entire bag of like Totino's pizza rolls, pop those in the oven, and then we'd maybe watch a little bit of West Side VHS tapes, then go drag sleds out in the backyard. And by the time we were done with that, Totino's are out of the oven, and we scarf those down and then go hit like a max effort box squat workout. So that was like my childhood. I played a bunch of sports. I'm a relatively large person. I'm about 6'2", 6'3", 250-ish pounds, and that's about where I ended up my high school career. Had some offers, but simultaneously had a weird artistic streak and decided to have a go at trying to do film school. Went to film school for 1 year, and then they had massive budget cuts. I ended up, with 15 other kids getting tossed out of the program just for budgetary reasons. Landed in a tiny little major called media production, which was, I say all the time, like I don't take L's in life, like whenever you get knocked down or forced to sort of deviate, the constraints of that really like distill a lot of things down for you. And so getting kicked out of film school and thinking, like I got the whole world in front of me, then ending up in another major that, I had never really intended on. It narrowed down, that wide golden road that I could walk suddenly was a very narrow path. And that distilled things for me because you couldn't afford to go off, a step in either direction. So just all of a sudden, everything became very decisive. Graduated out of that, moved to LA, got an internship on a documentary called Forks Over Knives, which was a huge like diet documentary. All about like it's the reason for the plant-based diet fad of.
I vaguely remember it. Yeah, vaguely remember it.
It's the most watched documentary in Netflix history.
I've seen it.
It was really big. Still like the biggest thing I've been a part of, to put it into context. But I was like a hired gun on that, who just sort of worked my way up through attrition, basically. As people butted heads and whatnot, someone would quit or get fired, and they'd go, hey kid, can you do this? And eventually I ended up, it was just me and the producer, and I was finishing the film and put that out. Didn't think anything would ever happen with it. Went from there to the NFL Network as an editor, and very quickly they realized, like, you look like one of the football players. There's a lot of ex-football players there, but generally they would be in more sort of like people forward positions, producers, assistants, things like guys who were getting out of football and trying to get a job in the industry. Right. And I looked like those guys because I was big and muscular and whatnot. And then people would be shocked, like I wasn't one of those guys. I'd then go back and work in a little edit booth, and no one would see me. And, so when I was in common spaces, everyone thought that I was an ex-athlete who was there for like a sort of career mentorship type deal. And when they realized that I had a background in sports and that I was very nerdy and about, I'm super into analytics. I started looking a lot at like Spark scores back then. And when they basically realized all the other editors sort of needed like a translator for them. like literally they had a position where like for those kind of ex-football players and young dudes who like played a lot of fantasy football, all the editors would have someone like that assigned to them, and to sort of like translate the directives of, if they needed a package on, let's say like I don't know, Andy Dalton, like
Right.
panning out as in his early years, they might they'd have someone there who'd be like, okay, Andy Dalton is a quarterback for the Bengals. He came from TCU. Yeah, he's the quarterback. He's the one who throws, and
Oh shit.
yeah, like it's oftentimes like very remedial stuff because these very technical sort of production jobs were typically people who didn't play sports oftentimes at any point in their life, but they were
Right.
good, on a keyboard. So I was like this weirdo there, because of that, and sort of because of that, like I kind of flamed out because what I wanted to do was not what they envisioned for me. And then I worked for Travel Channel and I was doing all these different things. I worked on the Bobby Bowden documentary for a little bit. And then one day I said, I'm going to, make my own documentary. And my dad had actually pitched the documentary to Louis Simmons before I had ever talked to Louis. I just sort of said to my dad, like, it would be cool to do a doc on West Side now that they're popular, now that like social media is a thing. This place we went in like the 90s with a little intense troll man at the center, to now, now that it's big, like do a documentary on that. And my dad really pushed starting that sort of against my will almost. And then that led into this like 4-year odyssey of going up to Columbus a few times a year and hanging out for weeks or months on end. And I realized very quickly, I was like, I'm way more interested in talking to Louis about strength and speed development than, making a documentary. Like that was in my mind, my life had always been, or my idea for my life had always been, if things don't work out, I'll go coach high school sports and I'll train kids in my garage like my dad did. That was, and so in my head, there was a lot of like sort of shame associated to that. I thought that was what failing would look like. And then I got to a point where I was like, well, put out West Side versus the World, and was like, this is supposed to be what success looks like. And all I want to do is talk to people about sports and strength and, athlete development. All I want to do is use this stuff that I've been watching and learning, for the last 4 or 5 years. So I moved to Florida with a woman who's now my wife, and very quickly was asked when I got back to Tallahassee. Somebody came to me and said, like, I remember you used to be really big in the weight room. Your old high school, they don't have anyone to do that. Like they could really use some help. So would you come in? And my first day I came home, my wife said, how was it? And I said, I don't think I want to go back, but I told these guys that, like I set up here tomorrow, so I don't know what I'm going to do. At the end of the next day, she said, how was it? And I said, I think I want to quit everything else. I think I just want to coach. And she was like, okay, well, what are they going to pay you? And I said, oh no, this is like voluntary. They don't pay me.
Yeah.
And she's like, like, you don't have that much money. Like we have to make money somehow. Like, well, I just successfully like created and sold like a documentary about powerlifting. I'm sure I can think of something. Right. And from there, I had bought jump mats and I had bought lasers and I had bought VBT. So I had all these toys, hence the Netflix money was running out fast. I had all these toys and they were all cool ideas, but they all felt unfinished. The customer service was terrible. I was just like, it doesn't feel like anyone is like trying to actually make a like sustainable business that serves people within the space. Everyone's sort of like, it feels like trying to exploit a half-cocked idea that they have. And I was working with some people. I was doing a lot of consulting around that time because a lot of people had commercially benefited from West Side versus the World. um, sales on, belts and powerlifting,
Right.
bodybuilding. If you were in the strength sports little area, I was making you money. And
Right.
Well, hell, the Westside Barbell T-shirts sell millions of those they've sold.
yeah, so everyone else was making a lot of money off of my movie, and I was working directly with some people to make a little bit back. But I ended up talking to one person who's now my partner, or one of my partners, and said, like, I have this other idea that I think could be, even bigger. And I think that there's, this opening within the market. There's this whole like style of, I was like, think of every, he had watched West Side versus the World. So I was like, think about how they train in that, how everything's based on speeds and special strengths. And I said, do you understand this is also how people train for, like, say, the NFL Combine? And this is how elite athletes train. It looks a little bit different, but it's the same principles. Like, this is where that comes from. But no one has sort of like understood how you tap into that yet. So I said, like, this is less crazy than trying to recoup money on a powerlifting documentary, and I did well on that. So, I convinced this guy to, sort of fund this crazy endeavor. And we went out and found an engineer who is now my, co-founding partner, Adam. And now that was like, that all started in like 2019, 2020. And now, 6 years later, and OVR has been out on the market for about a year and a half. And we've got VBT, timing gates, jump devices, broad jump mats. We got a lot of stuff, and it all sort of stems from serving what my needs were in terms of the first high school that I was at, and their dingy gym with, dirty old broken equipment, figuring out, like, how do you make this stuff that allows a great number of people to train in like a real world setting where people don't have sports science labs, and they don't have sports science lab budgets, and you've got way too many kids and way too few coaches. And like, how do you make technology that isn't about just testing, but it's about training? How do you audit your training without slowing it down? So that's in a nutshell, and now I'm here.
It's that's a great story, incredible genesis of where it is. And I didn't realize that the OVR was tied to some of the things you guys did in Westside Barbell. It's interesting because the space in the timing, it's like everyone's throwing things up. You know what I'm saying? They're throwing different things up there. Some of it works well, some of it doesn't work well, and but everybody's trying to jump into the space. And I think like the sprint-based football stuff, like their coordinated effort with the football track consortium started bringing a lot more of these things to light, which creates more people creating things that. But I agree with you. A lot of the stuff, like when I try to one of the things that when I was diving and looked into your stuff, like when I go watch videos on these things, I'm like, okay, that does one thing, you know what I mean? Or that's great. So I'm going to pay $3,000 for one thing, you know what I mean? It doesn't make a lot of sense, like as far as how some people have designed some of the stuff, right?
Yeah.
From a financial standpoint, like, and then you go and you look and you're like, okay, well, there are probably better ways to do it. You need to be, to me, it's like as a coach, and you probably think about it this way. I want to be able to get something that covers as many as the bases as possible for my athlete from a training standpoint, and then obviously testing standpoint. And I thought one of the things that Westside Barbell did, obviously, because you're always competing to try to be able to move the bar and move the weight, higher amounts. And what sprint-based football with the whole, not that any of this, not that some of this stuff is revolutionary. It's just putting packaging around it, but
Yeah.
but you know, record, rank, and publish stuff I think is important, right? I mean, you know, I guess record, rank, and publish. That was probably what I was doing when I was running 100 football combines around the country, right? Obviously, we were record, ranking, and publishing, but the packaging of it, bringing it more to light in a concerted effort among multiple people to do that, starts to like stimulate a lot of people's brains as to, okay, what can we do? And one of the things that I like that you're doing is you're trying to package it so people who are looking to train and be able to test and to be able to measure each one of these components. And I think that's where your West Side Barbell experience is different than just the sprint-based football guys, right? Because you also understand how the movement of the bar can help the other stuff you're trying to do as well, right? On the field, off the field, speed, and all that, those kind of things. I'd love for you to talk about your approach on that, because there's a lot to dive into here, but I think that's one of the things. You correct me if I'm wrong. If I were to get inside your head, I see what you're doing with OVR. You're trying to put those pieces together so people have the full picture to be able to develop the athlete completely, if I'm not mistaken. So I'll let you dive in from there.
Sure. Yeah, as far as like how OVR kind of plays into that, yeah, in terms of developing it, again, it started, the idea and where it started from came from serving my needs as a coach. And I'm extremely, conjugate is the sort of language that I speak. I'm all about using different speeds, manipulating speed and time. Yeah, speed, time, and tension are the concepts really at the core of like all of my training philosophies. And even, I was speaking at a conference years ago where I said, gosh, what was it? That like training is reconciling the effects of time. Storytelling is also reconciling the effects of time. Like that's why I say again, like to other people, everything that I do sometimes looks disconnected, but to me and from the people who have like known me for a really long time, if you were to like find some of my old high school teammates, when I say what I'm doing to them, they don't really like bat an eye at it. It seems like almost linear and motivated. Like they can see how I went from step to step to step. They're like, oh yeah, of course you went off and you made a diet thing. And then, like, oh yeah. And then you were working for Travel Channel, like, and then, but now you're back doing the thing that you've always done, which is training. And yeah, we remember you trained that way. You were all about bar speed. So of course you made a bar speed thing. And we would jump all the time in the garage. So of course you have a jump thing, and we'd sprint all the time. So of course you have timing gates. And when I talk to coaches who come more from the sprinting based side of things, we get hung up on language. To me, the speed is speed, whether that's slow or fast. That's the nature of the speed. But speed, the rate at which things are moving, that's a concept. Humans are slow. There's nothing that humans do fast, right? So once you give up on the idea of like slow and fast, it's just movement is just movement. So, isometric, you're moving at 0. You're exerting force and tension, and moving at 0 means you spend more time exposing yourself to force and tension at, say, those joint angles, or maybe you're giving yourself more time to light up more motor units, create a larger stimulus that way. And then, max effort, you're moving at whether it's like 0.15 on a bench or 0.2 on a squat, you're moving relatively slow. And again, just relative, because everything that we do is slow. Usain Bolt is slow compared to a cheetah. Right. And a cheetah is slow compared to a car, and a car is slow compared to a plane, et cetera, all the way out to the speed of light. I'm also really weirdly into like physics and again, concepts of reconciling time. But so all that said, like when I would look at, say, something like feed the cats, I go, well, that's just Prilipin's chart. You know, like if you're training, let's say Bulgarian, right, and you're doing a daily max. Okay, so you're working up in a matter of just a few sets to a near maximal effort, maybe 95 to 100%, and you can only do that effort. You know, you can only hit 2 to 3 efforts over 90% if you're going to hit your peak. Okay, well, let's just apply that to sprinting. You can only hit a few efforts over that 90% to hit your peak. It's the same thing. We go, well, these guys are wearing Chuck Taylors and squat suits, and these guys are wearing, you know, Nike.
Right.
Yeah, these guys are wearing super spikes.
Right.
These guys are on a platform. These guys are on a Bainon track. But it's the same thing. We've called it different. We've dressed it up differently, but it's the same thing. You know, I was talking to someone literally this morning about you know, concepts of acceleration. And again, I tell people all the time, like, I'm much more strength biased than most people who are like within this space. There's a lot of strength people. There's a lot of West Side people who are extremely strength biased, but they don't like to deal with like the high speed movement on the other side. At the slow, if you were to define like sort of my training, the spectrum that I exist on, it's we slow things down and we use time to our advantage to create more tension, to create the adaptations that raise our potential force. And at the other end of the spectrum, we, you know, we move in between, but as we move to the other side, it's, you know, say like if I'm working with a pitcher, that pitcher never runs, right? If all within his sport, he never runs. Within his sport, the fastest thing that he does is pitch the ball. If you throw 90 miles per hour, that's pretty fast and that's pretty neurally taxing.
Correct.
And that requires a lot of coordination.
Damn right.
But pitching and what your body is doing when you pitch is relatively slow compared to max velocity sprinting. So just as I said this to Tony Holler once, we were talking, and I said, you know, like, you talk a lot about speed reserve. And guys who are training for, say, the 225 rep test, if I was talking to Bill Gillespie about 225 rep test, he'd say, like, you just get as strong as you can, because what's going to limit you is going to be your absolute strength, because you only have about 30 seconds before you gas out, right? So you don't train your strength endurance for that test. You raise your absolute strength. So you have a strength reserve. Strength reserve, speed reserve, that's the same thing in my mind. It's just a reserve of, you know, of an important quality. Absolutes have primacy over their developmental qualities. So you can't have strength endurance. That's a developmental quality of strength. So you need more strength in order to have more endurance. You need more speed in order to have more speed endurance. And likewise, rate of force development, you can't out jump your squat. You can't out accelerate your max V. So those are like, those absolutes are like limiters on the whole system. But likewise, and this is why within, you know, say field or court sports where, you know, you might never come close to touching max velocity. It's a third sort of reserve that I talk about, and it's a neural reserve. The most stressful thing that you can put your nervous system through, and I've talked like to Rolf Ullman on my podcast about this, is organizing a movement in an increasingly short amount of time. Yeah, right? Like if we add, that's how training works. We add time that allows us to add tension. We create that added tension because we're able through that added time to stimulate more motor units. This is sort of why, like Louis Simmons would say, you can't lift a heavy weight slow. You have to stimulate enough motor units to create the tension to overcome that weight. If it takes you too long, you fail that rep. You might have had the motor units, but you have to coordinate them fast enough to meet the demands of the activity. Sprinting, and where people start saying things that I, get really sort of triggered by, like, strong enough. Sprinting it's the ultimate test of, and when I say sprinting, I mean like max velocity is the ultimate test of the organization of the system within very narrow time demands. So the faster you can run, the easier organizing sub-maximal movements becomes. So the faster your body can move, the slower pitching now feels relative to the demands, like relative to the capacity of the body's ability to organize. The faster you can sprint, the slower, relatively, the demands of acceleration are. Likewise, you're still dealing with time, so you have to be able to accelerate fast enough so that you can use the available time to improve your max velocity sprint. You're only going to accelerate for about 5 seconds.
Right.
If you look at Olympic, again, to piggyback off of a conversation I was having right before this with somebody about acceleration versus max V, and in regards to like 40s, if you look at Olympic sprinters, they don't take a breath for their first 40 yards. The reason why they're not taking a breath for their first 40 yards is because they're reliant upon, like they're accelerating. And when you're accelerating, you're more tense. You're not getting into relaxed max velocity mechanics until after you breathe. That relaxation and conservation of energy thing doesn't happen until so far down the track. So I look at everything as some people are very into speed, some people are very into strength, and they have trouble reconciling those two things. Once you have sort of a grasp of both of those things, now you add in that component of time and understanding how the allotment of time that you have now, allows you to gamify a lot of things, and it changes sort of how you look at things.
I think that's a really good point. The adaptation. So you talked about adaptation, and you touched on it. The whole thing to me about whether it's strength or speed or throwing a ball faster,
they're all the same thing.
Right. To getting right. Like, why, if it's not just about recruiting the neurons and trying to change everything to be more fast twitch, it's about the actual thing that you're working and that adaptation of that. And that's one of the things that I think, and you talked about it greatly just there, that I think some of the stuff with the sprint-based movement, sprint-based football movement, now it's applying to other sports obviously as well, but that movement doesn't discuss the adaptation is what you're really working on. You're working on that adaptation, and then when just like with strength development, right, and explosion, let's say you're sprinting two days per week, two to three maximal reps, whatever that is, and you start to reach a point where you're getting to be where you can be at that time of your life cycle, right? Because if you're talking about children and youth athletes and high school athletes and even college athletes, right? They're still developing up until, I can't remember what the age is, but something like 25, 26 or whatever, when it starts,
I think it's like 25.
Yeah,
I think it's like 25 or 26.
Whatever you're quote unquote full grown.
Yeah.
So some of it, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, we have to be careful with in development and saying, I'm giving these gains, but some of it as well is that the fact that they're growing, right? And they're getting stronger. Now, obviously you're training, right? Those are recruiting it, but measuring what is real gains and what is growth as a human being, right? That's a very difficult part, which is one of the issues I have with it. Okay. When I get into discussion, because we push that aside, not you, I'm saying, but like that's pushed aside, like, hey, so I see the clips of this person who ran 10 whatever, and it's like, okay, well, he probably also was lifting and went from 150 pounds to 170 pounds of muscle and all these things, so all these things kind of work in concert is my main point on it, right? And yes, the speed thing is creating the maximal output, but then you also, just like in lifting, right? If I just went in 1 rep max, let's say twice per week, okay, I would, you probably would never recommend doing that, but let's say you would reach some sort of plateau, right? You would get to a plateau point if I was just doing that exercise to 2 days a week. There would come to a point where my development would certainly probably, and you could tell me if I'm wrong, certainly get near stopping, right? Not accounting for me getting older as a young athlete or anything like that, but and I'd have to do other things to develop, whether it's rep changes or exercise changes, to then push through that, where I could then start to recruit the fibers to get maximal effort. Can you talk a little? I don't know if I'm way off. This is kind of my thought process, having worked with so many athletes over the years. And much like you, I grew up with my father's still a track coach and was a phys ed teacher, and really
still going.
I was he had me working out, which was an advantage back then, not an advantage anymore in youth sports because everybody works out. But back then it was an advantage. At 10 years old, I was working out and lifting and starting to develop and certain things, which helped carry me through. I thought it was one of the things beyond sprinting and all that kind of stuff that helped me to become a better athlete earlier. Okay, so when I did hit puberty, now I could start to really safely lift more weights and all those kind of things. I was able to recruit more different, and yes, there's training methods were different back then, but I was bigger, faster, stronger. Like my father got me Bigger, Faster, Stronger magazine, became obsessed with it. Stefan Fernholm, I still remember the guy's name. I would work. I was doing all the stuff associated with that. It certainly helped me. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what I'm talking about, like the importance of the totality of all these things, right? And in development, and not getting caught up in the fact that, yes, a kid is getting older and he is going to get stronger if you are working him out with whatever you're working him out with.
Yeah. Well, so again, it goes back to that reconciliation of time and understanding the arc of time. So now we're talking about like the arc of time in terms of a person's physical development. So number one, understand that our physical evolution is thousands of years behind where society stands right now. Our lifespans are so long. We have, again, compared to other organisms, we have relatively few children. We, have taken over the world as a species, but we move slowly. But our minds allow us to make these external things around us that adapt and change very fast. So society has changed a ton, but genetically, we are like a pre-industrial revolution species, right? So, modern medicine and modern convenience of, and all these modern systems have allowed us to live these very long, comfortable lives. But what we're evolved for is, in essence, and you can see this within development, especially when you work with kids and especially when you time kids, right? I went back and I took over 100,000 combine results over the course of a decade. And I charted averages by age, right? And from 7th to 12th grade, the average vertical jump improved by about 5 inches in boys. Okay, now they underwent massive physical change, and their average vertical jump improved by like 5.4 inches. You can easily improve that in a couple months with directed training.
Correct.
Right? But for the
Right.
average person does not have directed training. So even when we start talking about training, there's such a wide variance on that. Yeah, everyone trains these days, and these are relatively recent combine results. So this is all like 2013 to 2023 type stuff. But the biggest increase within that happened, essentially right around puberty, like coming out of puberty. So between, say, 9th and 10th grade would be the biggest change. And then between 10th and 11th grade would be a very small change. And then something very interesting starts to happen. Between 11th and 12th grade, at some combines, there's no change. The kids get heavier, but they don't get any faster, and they don't jump any higher. And in many cities, they got slightly slower. They jump slightly lower, slightly, but it's statistically significant.
Right.
We talk about like the freshman 15. Kids who don't go to college get the freshman 15 too.
Yeah, they do.
Right? Kids who, we're aging.
Correct.
We're aging.
It's the natural maturation process, right? Like the just
right,
growth that just comes automatically.
Right. But so when you look at like pro athletes, that prime is like late 20s.
Right.
But when we look at people like at large, our prime is 10th, 11th grade. For most people, 10th, 11th grade is the peak of your athletic development.
Mike, I read a statistic that like most adults don't ever sprint past like age, I think it was like 27. Like a human will never sprint top speed ever. I don't know where I got it from. I don't know where I read it, but like that sounded about par for the course. You know what I mean?
No, it's true, but it's also, we acknowledge all that like in our 20s. We think about sort of like this line of, if you are an athlete, right? Like here's you in high school, and then we think this is you in college, and then maybe you get out into the pros, and it's a slower taper up, but you're tapering up and out. And we think about like, if you're, not a pro athlete, that's like, here's you in high school and here's you in college, and then a sort of slow down.
That's it. Yeah.
But the reality is, start watching. Here's girls at 15. Here's girls at 17. Here's boys at 17. Here's boys at 18. We're already on the slide down.
Right.
And what happens is pre-puberty, we are all very weak, right? When we contract our tissue, it doesn't create a lot of tension, doesn't create a lot of force. That also means that it doesn't take much energy, right? And how this plays out in the real world is, or biologically and developmentally, essentially before puberty, you are prey. You are a small, weak animal that is exposed to a number of threats. Now, luckily, we live in like a modern civilized society, and you're generally very safe, as safe as you've ever been in, the expanse of human history. But biologically, you're thousands of years behind that. Your body just knows, like, I'm vulnerable, I'm exposed. When you put your foot in the ground to run, you don't cover much ground. So what is the evolutionary, and you also don't exert much energy. You don't spend many calories to do it. So the biological mechanism there that is there to keep you alive is, we can't create distance. We can't create displacement. We better turn our feet over fast. We can't move. We can't hit very hard. So we better move very fast. We better have super fast reflexes, so that when a larger animal, and the number one prey sort of historically for humans, or the number one predator, is other humans. And you can see this, like if you're a parent and you've got a small child, you can get down the hall way faster than them. But when it's time for, to put them to bed, for whatever reason, this 30-pound tiny little human is just, like they're Barry Sanders all of a sudden.
Right.
Every time you reach for them, they're half a step ahead of you. They twist and turn and bob and weave. That's a biological defense mechanism. And it's possible because they don't create any energy expenditure when they're that small. So they can move and they can react. They can make so many decisions so fast. Now, they also don't have a frontal lobe, so they're limited on what kind of decisions they can make.
Right.
But then you hit puberty. And all of a sudden, especially with males, testosterone starts flowing. All of a sudden, now you're getting a lot stronger. But there's a cost to that now. Now, everything that you do takes energy. And so your brain starts to throttle down your neural efficiency unless it is supported with extreme stimulus, meaning training. But if we tease this all the way out, so you've got two things happening. You start to get naturally stronger in a big way, which allows you to make fewer decisions, but create a lot more havoc and chaos with each one. And the stronger you get, the more devastation you're capable of, but also the more energy that it takes. So your brain starts to slow down. The same sprinter, if you look over the career of a long sprinter or of a sprinter over a long duration of time, their turnover starts to slow down. But whether it's Shelly Ann Fraser-Price, who even after kids was running, her best times in her late 30s, which would be the equivalent of like a 42-year-old male who, I don't know, like there's not even a biological equivalent to insert like childbirth into there.
Right.
Right.
Or look at like a Justin Gatlin who's running his best times deep into his career. What makes that possible? His brain literally can't move as fast. They've seen this with esports gamers. 13-year-olds, if they understand the game, 13-year-olds dominate 17-year-olds because the 17-year-olds' thumbs can't move as fast as it's already, that aging has already started. It's already happening. And you only notice it, which means you only notice the fatigue, and the fatigue mounts as the outputs go higher, right? So you can train, talk about maxing out every day. You can max out a little kid every day. You can max them out twice a day. Their maxes, their outputs aren't even high enough to cause adaptation in their own body. They don't create any fatigue. That's why we use like brief maximal tension and 3 rep, 5 rep, these slightly higher rep ranges, because they are able to create more tension, which gives them this quasi maximal stimulus.
Right.
But with older kids, I'm good friends with Dave Hoff. If I tried to have Dave Hoff do the sets and rep schemes that I have my kids do, he would literally die because his outputs are so high. Like he'd have a heart attack and die. If I have them try to do his workouts, they're not strong enough to get the stimulus from him.
Right.
Likewise with sprinters, the top level sprinters run less. Because if you're running 26, 27 miles per hour, that's a devastating stimulus that'll destroy you. This is also, side note, this is how you can tell a lot of track methodologies that are ruined by steroids, where, super high volumes, they get passed down and popularized in high school and middle school, and they break young kids.
Correct.
And you go, how could a faster mature athlete endure those exposures? Because their efforts would all be so much more intense. It'd be so much more devastating. And yet it's ruining like young kids. They can't even do it. And you go, oh, you need needles to do those programs. They're leaving a huge chapter out of that book that they're selling.
Of course.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But so all of it, and the weird thing is
development to that part of it. Like that's what is not understood. It's also funny because coaches try to coach in that manner, and it's not even possible, and they get mad at the athlete. You know what I mean? It's like
right. Well, and that's it. Like every track coach, if you're a coach, think right now. Think about your freshman athletes. I don't care what sport it is. If you've got like 10 kids, then you probably have this scenario playing out in front of you right now. You have a freshman who you're so excited about, and you see where they could go, and they give great effort. They hang on every word that you say. They're like a little puppy dog who just wants your approval, and they've got a little bit of ability, and that makes you so excited. Now think you've probably got a sophomore who was that freshman last year. And man, they're really good for a sophomore. They're not quite as good as you would hoped they would be, but the process is paying off. They're seeing the fruits of their labor. You know, maybe you thought they'd be like number 1 in their region as a sophomore, and they're like 2 or 3. They're not quite where you want them, but you know, they look, people point out like, oh yeah, that's going to be one of the dudes in this area. Then you got a junior who was that sophomore and he was that freshman, and he's good. Like, don't get me wrong, he's good, but is he really any better than he was as a sophomore? You know, like maybe a little bit, but he didn't take the leap that you wanted him to take. But he's still got a pretty good attitude. He's still listening to you. You know, you still get along great with him, and you're still thinking, man, when he's a senior, he's going to take another step forward, and he's going to be a great kid. And he's maybe the kid that you've been hoping. You know, maybe you got a whole class of these kids, and you've been hoping that when they mature up to seniors, because they looked so good as freshmen, they listened to everything you said. As a sophomore, they were pretty good. Like, there was so much promise. As juniors, now it's like they're almost there. And then their senior year hits. And man, they just drag ass through practice. They're like, they all look like Vince Carter in his 17th year. You know, they with the
Mavericks or some shit. Yeah. Like he just kind of like
their attitude starts to tank. They always say that they're hurting, and you don't believe them. Meanwhile,
right.
your practice and your training look like this. The same thing you're doing today is the same thing you were doing last year. He never complained about it last year. The same thing he was doing the year before. And he was getting pretty good results from it the year before. And the same thing he was doing as a freshman, and he was bought hook, line, and sinker, and he never had any complaints. And then he had very spare complaints. And now he's complaining all the time. And you go, you know, oh man, he turned into a bad kid. And the reality is no. When he was near puberty, he was on nature's steroids, and he could recover from anything you threw at him.
Anything.
He felt good. His outputs were also relatively low, so he didn't cause much damage to himself no matter what you threw at him. As a sophomore, he's not recovering quite as well, but he's still progressing at such a rate that neither one of you notice. As a junior, you see his progress is slowing down, and you can't put your finger on why, but he's still good, so you're not too worried about it. And then as a senior, he's broken and he's frustrated. And he never questioned you, but now because he hurts, because he's also, you got to think about it from the athlete's perspective. He was 16 the year before, and he had never slowed down. He was 15. He had never slowed down. He had always he shows up, he gets better. That's the relationship that y'all always had. He never had to question anything. And now suddenly, for the first time, he's not just getting better. And so he starts questioning. And now for the first time, things aren't really going as like, for the first time, he's encountering uncertainty, and he's projecting it onto you as a coach. And now you're having that static. And the reality is, like, if you see this cycle playing out over and over again, if you can think of who is this year's model of that kid, change something within your program so that the junior version of that kid does not turn into the senior version. Change something so that that sophomore doesn't turn into the junior. Oftentimes, if you're measuring everything, you can see it coming. You can say to your young kids, like, no, y'all can run another. But my older kids, man, you know, you're getting slower already. Like, call it there, go in, you know, like having a kid ride out at like a consistent 7 or 8 on sort of an effort consistency scale over 4 years is going to beat the kid who, burns it bright at 10, because that kid's also going to be super demanding. And if you can't always be one step ahead of him, he's going to get frustrated and he's going to start looking for answers elsewhere. And he's going to start questioning you as a coach.
Totally agree. And I think this generation is very different when it comes to that, in terms of questioning things, along with parents too, with the with social media the way it is, the access to see more things and broaden the horizon, right? I mean, if you look back at how we talk about this all the time, most people coached the way they were coached, right? And it was more of that militant discipline. You do this, no questions asked, like that's how it is. And then if an issue arose, now it's mom, dad, like coach did Hey, you listen to coach, right? That has totally changed in this world that we live in, where, issue arises, kid gets in the car and it's, well, your coach doesn't know, or, you know what I mean? So the questioning aspect and looking for answers is something that, even, look, it's been changing for a while, but as recent as it is, I think it's so different.
Yeah. Answers weren't available in the middle of the week.
Right.
If
you
if
can
I
look
didn't
up answer 2 seconds after practice.
Yeah. If I didn't like what
some of these
coach
kids have it in
doing,
their hand looking for the answer, they have it. They're like, coach, you're wrong. Or coach, this guy says this, like, all right, buddy. So that's why coaches have to, you got to be on your shit.
The adaptation part of what you're talking about, like for our audience, I think it's important to understand that adapting your program to the individual as much as you can. Obviously, when you're in team training, it's harder, right? You're a coach, and obviously you're coaching 100 kids, and it's hard.
Right. Even with that, I coach about 230 kids right now.
Well, that's where measuring stuff helps tremendous.
Yeah, but I only have, like, people ask me all the time. They go like, "Well, how do you train your basketball team?" My basketball team trains at the same time as my wrestling team.
Right.
Yeah.
And they do this. I write the same workout up on the board. The same.
Now, coach, in comparison, is it differentiate male female?
No.
Same workout.
No. I write the same workout up on the board. Now, some of my, I'm going to sort of coach it differently. My younger kids, I want them to get through everything. My older kids, I'm going to be, shutting them down earlier. I'm going to be, I'm not worried if my older kids are hitting, their best numbers on their 5th or 6th exercise of the day. I'm worried, are you jumping higher? Are you running faster? Okay. But every.
Did we lose him?
Did we lose coach? Can you hear me, Dave?
Yeah. I can hear you. I don't know if we lost him.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. Huh. But I've worked with a 32-year-old pro sprinter before. You know what he needed to improve his relative strength? And by doing that, all of a sudden his splits all got better. His broad jump got better. His vertical got better. He ran a better 60. He ran a better 100. He got better when he got stronger. He had been with somebody else who told him, well, you're at this level now. You're strong enough. Well, again, he's 32. His brain is slowing down, so he needs to displace himself more per step. How do you do that? His ground contacts are getting longer. Your ground contacts are getting longer to allow you to push longer. So he was training right alongside a college tight end and right alongside a college pitcher. The college pitcher, his 40 dropped from a 4.9 to a 4.48 in the same amount of time. He wasn't even training for that. He went from throwing 92 to 95. He needed the 5'9" college pitcher, the 6'5" tight end, and the 6'3" sprinter all needed the same thing. They needed to get stronger and they needed to get stronger and shorter durations of time, and they needed to improve their body's sort of capacity for more high rep or more high intensity outputs, which is a slow process, right? You can get the same person to eventually, like a lot of coaches, they want to do everything on like week one, day one, week one, and their kids are rolling around on the ground puking. And I go, that's great. If your kids are puking, then that means they're not going to run a PR and a fly 10 or a PR and a jump for 2 weeks.
Exactly.
2 weeks.
Right.
You're
You
gonna have
just
the residual
wipe them
impact of that.
out. Yeah, you're done. You're done.
That happens.
You just made yourself easier to beat. You just made yourself easier to fire. You just made, in some instances, you just made your kids, dinner table less secure.
Right.
I hope you
100%.
felt real tough about doing it.
It's
right. Nice job, buddy.
It's one of it. By the way, it's still, and as you push down the levels, when you get towards youth, it's worse.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one of the things that I still see all the time. Like I hear it. If my son comes out of it, like I coach my son in football. We apply a lot of sprint-based football stuff. With me working with my son directly, I try to focus on adapting him because who he was a year ago physically at 9, he was super lean. Now all of a sudden at 10, he developed he just started to grow. He's just bigger kind of kid. He looks like he went from being a skinny, super quick guy to he looks like a Iowa farm boy. You know what I mean? So like those things change. You have to adapt your training to he's like, how come I'm not as fast as I was last year? I said, well, we have to slowly adapt to what your body. You figure out the things that your body can and can't do. Where are you weak? Where are you strong now? What your biological changes, are causing different things to work well, better than ever, and causing other things that you did very well last year, not that we're going to have to adapt your training to develop that, right? But when I see other coaches, it's just all right, just run, suicides down and back 9,000 times. You know what I mean? Oh, okay. So who is that rewarding? Is that reward your most explosive athlete? Strong, explosive athlete's going to look pretty crappy in that, right? And your cross country runner kid who happens to play, let's say, basketball, right? You know what I mean? In the winter, right? He's going to look phenomenal, and you're going to put him in a premium. You're going to be like, hey, he should be playing more because he's in great shape. Yeah, but he can't guard anybody, So.
Yeah, and at higher level schools, there are a lot fewer cross country runners on the basketball team.
Correct.
Damn right.
And yet they want to run the kids like they're cross country runners. Those kids can't make their team.
Correct.
And they, as soon as you give people that, this is to tie everything back to OVR for a minute.
Yeah.
As soon as you start giving people a feedback mechanism,
yes.
It helps direct the kid's intention. And the kid who probably isn't learning a ton from you anyways, because they don't have a frontal lobe, they can't.
That's the best.
Yeah, I'm from the South, obviously, so I like to, my kids sometimes will say things about, well, I'm smart or I'm mature, and I say, you're all in the oven, ain't a biscuit in the bunch.
Buddy.
None of y'all are all just, wet dough at this point. None of y'all are even rising. You won't get it. And in 10 years, you'll understand. I said, this is why people look back at their high school yearbooks and they're so embarrassed. It's because y'all have no frontal lobes. Y'all don't understand. You're out here operating with nature's lobotomy. There. Yeah. But the point being, you can tell a kid do this or do this or do this. Kids understand numbers,
right?
They understand higher number good, lower number bad. Okay,
that's why the whole list rank, rank, record, publish thing works so well. It's because we talk about it all the time. You can do anything, but when you put something on paper and on a list where somebody's at the bottom, somebody's in the middle, somebody's at the top, like now that becomes like a target for something that they can actually see. It's why we've seen the evolution, and we talk about this too, like with the now being able to record things and actually put times to things and now put that up, like with technology and its development and all those kind of, that just has taken everything to an entire level, because especially for, you know, I coach high school, you know, athletes like that, that is the pivotal time for them to want to be and part of something, right? Like that middle schoolish, high school time, like nobody wants to sit at that table in the cafeteria where, you know, the cool kids aren't. So it's the same thing when it comes to like listing and doing all that. Make a list, put it on a list, and now we're talking taking it into a different stratosphere.
Well, and the part that people don't account for as well, you know, perhaps the most important part here is because the kids, you know, the kids can only adapt to what you expose them to. And if you expose them to something that they can adapt to, you know, like God help those kids, but the most important change that could be made in that scenario, adding technology, adding a means to assess and quantify helps those kids. But what either helps them the most or hurts them the most is your decisions as a coach. So when you start saying, you know, if you like a list, you like a leaderboard, you like, you know, for me, it started, hey, every kid who jumps over 30 inches, I'm going to put them on this list, put it on the locker room door. And day one, we had 2 kids. And 6 months later, we had 70 kids. And a year in, we had 135 kids. And now, you know, well, that was before OVR, and our sort of, you know, a 30-inch jump for us is more like a 33 or 34-inch jump for some of the other mats out there. So suddenly those lists become a lot harder, a lot more competitive. But as a coach, no coach has a leaderboard or a record board in order to just see it sit stagnant, right? So if you start to notice, I have less kids this year doing, you know, whatever your metric is. I have less kids squatting big, benching big, power cleaning big, whatever. Even if it's just that, because a lot of coaches, they don't even get that far. They don't have like that sort of level of observation and accountability. They're not recording, even if, you know, if you're at a school or whatever, you say, you know, well, that's nice, Mr. OVR man, but we can't afford any of this stuff. Great. Get a pen and pencil. Start looking at like metrics you can track. Daily attendance. You know, average it out at the end of the week. Google is free. Like, start a sheet and start looking. What bring, you know, this is much like the Tony Holler feed the cat sort of route. Like, how do you get more kids onto the team? More kids onto the team. You know, there's high schools in this country where like football is straight up dying. And it's because kids, you know, you used to go to, I hated it when I was a player. I was at practice because I wanted to be good at football. And I'd have, you know, 20 kids on the sideline who I was like, y'all don't care about football at all. Y'all are here because me and these 6 other guys that you want to talk to and annoy all day. We're here, so you're here because we're here. I would 100%. Prefer if you were anywhere else. I would prefer if I only saw you Friday night in the stands. But fine. You're here. And nowadays, those kids all leave. And then the 6 kids that they were there for, they also are seeing what is every other school around town doing. And, you know, like, so they have the opportunities to make far more choices, which should be a good thing. You can leverage that to your advantage. So you can, you know, I track my daily attendance. I track height and weight. I track, you know, like near daily. You know, I see even things, you know, height fluctuates incredibly throughout, you know, day to day. Weight fluctuates a ton. You see, you know, oftentimes the skinny beanpole kid who, you know, tells you like, oh, I'm 130. And then you have them stand on a scale and they're 124. And they're like, well, the last time I got weighed, I was 130. And you go, when was that? And they go, 6 months ago at the doctor. Right. It was the winter time. They're wearing a hoodie and, you know, boots and.
Right.
You know, like, And that kid will tell you, well, I eat all the time. It's so hard to gain weight. And you go like, no, it isn't. No, you don't. You just never weigh yourself. So you don't realize how bad the problem is because it's never on the front of your mind. If that same kid starts weighing himself and, 2 months later, he's like, Coach, I'm 145 now.
Yeah.
That's amazing. How did we find 2 years of physical development in 6 weeks? You just got on the scale. We didn't even talk about what do you eat. We just said, please eat. Please go weigh yourself and eat. But you start looking at all of these things like, hey, man, we used to have 80 kids who'd show up here. Now we got, 30. What happened? And you go like, your workouts used to take an hour and 15 minutes, and now they take 2 hours and 15 minutes. Kids don't want to be there.
Absolutely.
Oh, it used to be that like you can figure out all these small changes, and then they start to multiply and leverage off of one another. But oftentimes it's just people have a hard time seeing that progress over durations of time. Again, being able to like deal with and manipulate time is like a superpower. If you're able to sort of like, if you're able to remember where you were and you're able to look at both a macro of time and a micro, if you're able to go, we made this change yesterday and see today we're hitting PRs. Like I said, I trained 200 kids and I only use one basic program. The reality of that is I will have like a dozen kids at any time that have significant adaptations made to their system. But that's still 95% of the kids get great progress from essentially the exact same thing. And then those adaptations, those deviations that I make, well, it's like 6 of those kids have the exact same deviation. Because even as individuals, it's like there's only a few different types of athlete. There's only a few different types of people. So if it works for one group, you probably just solved a massive hole in your, if I give something to 5 kids, if it works, 3 or 4 out of those 5 will show me results pretty fast. Then I'll apply it to 50 kids. And if it works there, then I apply it to everybody. So we can make huge sweeping changes. And it's almost like viral progression where it works for for patient 0, then the next ring, then everybody.
Right.
But all of training works because humans generally adapt in a similar fashion. So if you're killing one kid, you're probably killing like half your kids, if not more. If you're, that one kid may be the one who's brave enough to complain. That's the other thing is, like the canary in the coal mine type effect. I want as few, I want all my canaries singing and I was going to say, I don't want to hear any canaries, but that means that they're all dead. You want your canaries all singing, when you've just got that one kid who's popping up, hey coach, my knee hurts.
Right.
Look around the room. How many kids look, how many kids just posture looks hobbled? Rarely is it just the one kid.
Absolutely not. It's never usually an isolated incident. There's usually multiple numbers involved.
Especially now where kids are less active outside of practice and outside of workouts than ever before, which is why we have all the other, injuries that we have, is because they're not getting that early childhood development. They're coming in with lower work capacities, lower general fitness than ever before. But likewise, when you get kids who are like deep within your system and then they get hurt, you're probably about to have several other kids hurt with a similar issue. If you solve one kid's problem, you probably solve 10 or 15 kids' problems.
Right.
There's no doubt. And that's a big deal. And adapting that is a huge thing, like recognizing when there is a problem with something you're doing and being willing to look at it and change it when the one kid is complaining or you have a couple kids that are complaining, being able to assess that. That's a coach thing that like a lot of coaches are not willing to do. And I think it's really, really important because the idea on performance is long term, right? It's long development. long-term improvement at the same at the same time that you're trying to win games now. If you don't have them in week 8 or week 7, you didn't do the right things. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of coaches, you talked about the first day thing, right? A lot of coaches hit so hard the first week or 2 to try and get everything in. It takes their kids 3 weeks to recover from that.
And that's game 1 and 2.
Yeah. I like to tell the story of the first year that I was at Florida High. I was working with the volleyball team, and they were a very good volleyball team. The coach had won 5 state championships, and she had a good team. She had a good group of kids, and I started to notice. This is only a few weeks in. I started to notice these girls would come to me like 3 days a week, and I noticed there was a particular day where everyone was down like 4 to 5 inches. And the other 2 days were very similar. And then this one day each week, they would all be just crushed. And I asked the girls, well, what happened? Why is today different? And it was because they would come to me later in the day. And I would go, but you practiced before workouts the other 2 days. What happened? What's your schedule on this middle day in between? And I go, well, we have a study hall instead of practice. I go, okay. And she goes, and then we have conditioning. I go, well, what's conditioning? And it was this 2-mile run through the woods, basically, up and down hills and through sand and whatnot. And then the girls come to me, and none of them can jump.
Right.
And prior to me, they're not getting their jumps measured daily. They're not seeing it in increments of, a decimal point. So now all of a sudden they're seeing, that which is making them more upset and depressed. But now it's also giving me leverage to have a conversation. And their coach comes up on one of these days, and it's probably the 3rd time we've done this. The coach comes up and says, how are they jumping? And I say, well, not really good. She's like, really? I said, yeah, she normally jumps 24. She's jumping 19. That's a big drop off. And I was like, so I know now what's happening. And I asked the coach, so what do y'all do before this? What makes today different? She goes, oh, well, they do their conditioning. And I go, oh. And she goes, why is that? Is that bad? And I said, well, I don't want to, I just got here. You've got 5 rings. I'm not trying to change anything. And she goes, no, tell me if it can get me. She goes, I have this. If it gets me this, I don't care what it is. If you tell me shutting up gets me this, then you won't hear a peep from me. And I was like, well, that's crazy. That literally just handful of gold. And then she's like, if you can get me this, if you can get me one more finger, I don't care what it is that you tell me to change. I'll change it. And
because most aren't like that.
No, but part of it was, I was exotic coming in. I was this new stimulus. Different. I was an outsider, right? And it's kind of like going to, there's a lot of people who are going to go to a conference and they're going to listen to somebody talk, and they're going to come away super excited with a change that they want to implement because some expert that they traveled to see gave them a change. Mm-hmm. But when their kid comes to them and says hey, this is what's happening to your program right now, they don't want to make that change. They don't want to hear that feedback. On a certain level, it's just imagine that kid coming up to complain to you was a speaker at a conference. Just imagine that he's not even talking about your specific circumstance. He's talking about a theoretical. And allow yourself to have that light bulb moment, because again, it's change is scary. But if you're trying to get from the 5 hand to the 6 on the other hand, you need the change that's going to get you that next. Change represents an opportunity. When an expert tells, when someone that you deem to be an expert tells you something to change something, if someone that you think is a financial expert turns and leans into you and whispers, buy Apple or something. You're like, oh, I got to do that. You know, that's what's going to get me rich. That's a change. That's an alteration to your like, you don't have to attach yourself at all times to everything that you're doing. You can be excited about the change and the potential. You know, we all want change inherently. Like every coach wants a new play that's, gonna work just a little bit different because they have a scenario in mind where, like they want that added little spice. Oftentimes just because they're bored.
Right.
But under the right circumstance and the right presentation, you want change. Just allow it to happen. Be excited about it.
It's a scary thing for a lot of people though, because change, you know what I mean? Like it's a fear of the unknown. And we talked about it with Tony, in the way that, some of these guys have implemented the whole feed the cats, right? Or just anybody really. The fear now of going in and doing something so different, right, has to be, you need the administration to be on board, right? You're nervous about that. It comes down to job security, right? Like there's parents that will look at it and be like, what do you mean we're not practicing in full pads? What do you mean we're not tackling?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like those implements of like going out on that limb, one, for I think a lot of guys, the job security thing is such a fear factor that they're not willing to even get on board with it. Or the others, the blowback, I think, of what could be if it doesn't go the right way, just puts a level of fear that people aren't willing to risk it. You know what I mean? And that's before you even get like, people don't like being uncomfortable to begin with, right? Like, to live in that world of discomfort, that's really kind of where you make your biggest strides, is when you're, willing to take those risks. And, but you have to know, the situation and know everything going around it. I see that fear factor, like just people won't even entertain it because it's so different, or it's something of that nature, right? And it's kind of like what you're talking about, like when you implement that with the younger kids coming in, when they get into that new program, right? Like, why are we doing this? And you have to explain it, and then it's I don't really know, and then you're kind of not getting the all in, really slippery slope and a scary place for a lot of guys, especially coaches, where structure is like what we're looking for, and we do what we know because it's comfortable. So that world of discomfort is it's hard for a lot of people.
Well, it's also, you don't make huge, as I say, like, you have to change. You also have to remember that change is not inherently large. Change can be very small. Change, change doesn't have to be overnight. Change can be gradual. Change should be gradual in most cases. So, like with those, what I'll often point out, like if I'm starting a new team, their first day, we're probably going to do, let's say they come in and it's an upper body day. Everyone else is doing, probably 6 exercises plus maybe a sprint. And then this group is going to do, just the primary exercise and jump. So they might spend, they're in there for an hour, and all they did was 4 working sets and then a handful of jumps. And then the next week, now they're doing 4 working sets, a second exercise, and a handful of jumps. And in 2 months, their program looks the same as everyone else's. It's like playbook install. Like bad coaches often, they want to install everything day one. Like you ask them, how many plays are we going to run? And they're like, oh, week 1, we're going to learn 30 plays. You go, okay, but really, what are we doing? Like how, like these kids don't know what position they play. Like learn. Good coaches spend more time and do less purposefully. Good coaches acknowledge, I only actually have this much time or this much bandwidth to be effective. So I'm going to build competency over what we can right now. And then we're going to expand slowly. And over the course by the end of the season, you've got counters and wrinkles off of everything, and you've got tags, and like by the end of the season, you're rolling in the playoffs and you've got micro adjustments that you can throw on to everything and be effective. But week 1, you're not going to be there. Stop trying.
Right. Don't expect to be there.
Yeah. And likewise, you don't need to tell people when you're making changes. So, like if I were going to make sweeping changes with my kids can only realize that things are changing when they look back really far. When when kids come back, alumni come back, they look at our program and go like, wow, this is a lot different. And the kids doing it will go, really? Like, this isn't,
because they don't know.
I feel like we've done the same thing forever.
Absolutely.
Because we used to do 4 sets of that. Now you only do 2.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, there was a point in time where I was like, what if we chopped 1 set off? So we were doing 4 sets of 5. Well, what if we go to 3 sets of 5? And a month later, they're making slightly better progress. Well, okay, so we don't do 4 sets of 5 anymore because that was apparently that amount of volume and intensity was having we might have been getting better, but now we're getting better slightly faster. And then we're getting
talk quickly about how OVR helps with that. How the feedback helps with that part of it, because so coaches understand how getting that data and that information can help what you're talking about.
Yeah. So, for example, like to build capacity, right? Like and build fitness to actually, feed the cats type sprint based, football coaches. A lot of people who sort of speak in this similar terminology that I do, although I don't like identify as either one of those things because I've talked about this forever. This is like West Side concepts to me. But with that volleyball team, the coach said, finally, well, how do we condition in your model? And I said, here's what we do. We're gonna, number one, I look at the clock on the wall, and if our workout is say 50 minutes, I'm gonna see how much did we get done in 50 minutes. In a couple weeks, we're gonna get that amount done in 45 minutes. And now I can add in another exercise. But likewise, so on a holistic scale, we're building density as the kids are more comfortable running the system, as they're able to anticipate what their next move within the workout is every day. They start getting more and more done in less and less time, but it sort of constricts slowly. And then we accordion out and add something new in. And I'm constantly looking for when does that density build? But on a micro sort of level with our conditioning, we do a lot of like sled pulls. So we might have the kids drag a 150 pound sled and sort of a power walk style, and they'll do about 60 yards as 1 rep. And they might do, let's say 3 reps, a round of about 3 reps. So 180 yards of sled. And then they'll jump. We'll put the OVR jump down and they'll jump. And at first, when we put that sled work in, they're going to jump lower. And when I say we'll jump, I mean we'll go do, every 20 to 30 seconds, they'll kind of just form a little group around the jumps, and they'll cycle in and out. And each kid will get maybe 4 to 8 jumps. So a couple minutes jumping. They do a couple minutes on the sled, a couple minutes jumping. And after, at first they might be down 2 to 3 inches on average. And a week and a half in, they're going to be right around where their regular jumps would be. And then a week and a half later, they might be up 2 to 3 inches as a result of having done that sled work at the end of their workout. So what we see in real time is, how is their work capacity growing? When they start to consistently jump higher after that sled work, they're in better condition. They've got a bigger gas tank. And what do? We add another round, another triplet of those sleds. And after 3 weeks, suddenly they're jumping higher after a second round of sleds and a second round of jumping. They're jumping even higher. And we keep building this out. So after a few months, I did this with my volleyball girls, and this team was stacked. We had a day where it was 104 degrees outside. They were jumping on the Vertec in between each triplet of sleds, and we had a Division I running back who was in town about to leave for a West Side based school, though he elected not to train with me and our group, but he wanted to come flirt with the girls. So he showed up and he goes, "Oh, y'all are just doing sleds." And it's 100+ degrees outside. We're out in a field. It's very humid. And he's dragging the same weight as the girls. And 4 girls that day hit over 10 feet on the Vertec after 4 rounds. So 1,200 yards of this. That might not be right. 720. They either did 720 or they did like 1,200 yards of sled, but they kept doing sleds and then coming back and doing Vertec. And the girls, when their Vertec starts to go down or their OVR jump starts to go down, that's where we would call it, right? We would add density and we would add volume only when their outputs rose.
Makes sense.
So, and if we're coming off of a season or something where maybe they missed a bunch of workouts because they were making a deep playoff run, then we would see like their outputs would crash, maybe after 1 round, and we would slowly build that back up. But in 3 weeks, you can build an incredibly, high work capacity if you never, burn the stake. Well, if they're, on a fly with the sprints, if they were, if they all ran good times on their first, we're going to run a second. We're pretty much always going to run at least 2. But if your second one is within a couple percentage points of your first, or it's better, typically it's better, unless their fitness level is really low. As your fitness level rises, you need more sprints, you need more stimulus to get, to warm up. And then, like as soon as we start to see significant regression, we shut you down. So in week 1, where coaches get really antsy, it might be your kids only run twice. And at the start of the next semester, it might be, man, we ran 6 fly 10s in an hour and 15 minutes. And guys were PRing on their 6th. By that point in time, your kids are all ripped. And they're not even breathing heavy or anything. And you as a coach look out and go, wow, they're in such great shape. But in the early goings, you get nervous. But if you were to time your kids on, you may traditionally be giving them like 6 sprints, and you time them and you see like, oh, wow, no one ran a PR after attempt 2. Should you have run the next 4? Probably not. Because your kids also, again, your kids are largely getting their fitness from the same place because you're the only place they're doing anything active, by and large. Right. So, it's again, it's not like you have this great individualization that needs to happen. But and then on a larger scale, if I see that all of our, if we do jumps as like a daily readiness thing, or we work it flies in whatever distance. They don't have to be super long flies. We do 10 to 20s, mostly because of logistical reasons. Like there's a strip of sidewalk right by the weight room that's easy to do 10 to 20s. If I notice that like the team average for the day is significantly lower, either something happened at practice or something happened in the weight room. If everyone's doing good and one kid is down, you go have a conversation with that one kid, and you find out something like, oh, I had I threw a bullpen and I did 2 showcases this weekend. You go like, come on, you're killing yourself out here. But if you see everyone's down, okay, then you know that you did something. And you make a small adjustment. Maybe it's you cut practice 5 minutes early. And at first it seems like you're just doing it one time type thing. But then you notice well, their outputs came back up. Well, if cutting, 5 minutes here or there helped, keep cutting, cut again, see if that happens, see what happens. Is it like trim when you start to think about it, almost like, you want to preserve the tread on the tire for game day as much as possible. Like how much do you have to take the car out before you start seeing ill effect? Simultaneously, how much can you take the car out? Right? So over time, if we never push the kid to, again, if you push them to that point of puking, you've probably set them back 2 weeks in terms of their physical development.
This is where old school quote coaches, that was the mark. That's what they looked for. The more that puked, the more that were shot, the more that you really kind of like grinded them into the ground. It was, all right, we've done our job. Now we're good to go. Like here, that's when we had it's so opposite of how we should be approaching things to get, the most out of our student athletes.
Yeah. Well, it's also like a lot. That's where, again, like a lot of coaches will look and they'll say, well, this is what we did and we won week 1. Okay. And we won week 2. Okay. And then you go like, what about like 7, 8, 9? And they'll say something like, oh, it was all going great until that injury.
Well, and that's what I was just going to get to, Coach. The health aspect of it.
Or you go like, oh, it worked all through the season. Okay, so like, tell me about your most successful state championship team. And the vast majority of coaches don't have a state championship, right? Yeah. So like, if you got a handful of rings, you're welcome to tell me I'm wrong about anything. If your hand is empty, then your system has never played out before. If you trained one kid, if some people will look at things and say like, oh, my kids are strong. They all power clean 200 pounds.
Great.
Yeah, that doesn't tell me anything. Tell me about your 400-pound power cleaners. If you want to talk about strength, tell me about your 400-pound power cleaners. Tell me about your 400-pound benchers. Tell me about your 600-pound squatters. Tell me about, like if you want to talk about fast kids, okay, tell me about all the kids you've had break 10.5. And a lot of people suddenly can't tell you anything. And you go like, so your standards are all like kind of strong, kind of fast, kind of good. Oh, we went to the playoffs. All right, that's like saying, a kid got to signing day. If you got to signing day, but you came home, you came home and told mom and dad, like, at Thanksgiving that you're not on the team anymore, we like as an industry, there's this problem of celebrating halfway goals, right? Like I'm of the opinion, like you should never want to reach your goals. The goals should be so outrageously high that if you do see them coming up on the road, you automatically adjust and go, that's no longer the goal. The goal has to be further. But for a lot of people, we've done good enough, but and they use that as the justification for not changing anything. And simultaneously, they're terrified of something that's going to provide you a metric. But meanwhile, I think most coaches these days are fundamentally sort of okay with like, if you told them, like, hey, you've run that play on 3rd down 27 times this year and you've never converted.
Yeah.
They'd take it out of the playbook. Right? Like there's areas where it doesn't matter, old school or not, it doesn't, there's ways of reframing this conversation both for others and for yourself. If you're afraid of being labeled a feed the cats coach or being labeled soft or something, like you don't have, it's also a thing like we tell kids, the running back who came out to flirt with the volleyball players, on his second round of sleds, he ended up puking in the field. Now he was no longer a player at our school anymore. He was an alum, so I didn't mind if he was puking in the field because he's not my athlete anymore. But I told him, hey, you're not going to be able to keep up with those girls in their conditioning. He looked at it and said, well, those girls aren't running, so where's the conditioning? I look at it and go, what's hard about jogging down a trail? That's not hard. The only people you're going to pass on that trail when they would go do that old school conditioning would be like moms and, middle-aged dads trying to, keep things together for their 9 to 5 office job.
Yeah.
So I'm like, if
Yeah.
your conditioning is an out of work, 40 something's hobby, then it's probably not good conditioning. What is it conditioning you for? Nothing valuable. If we're telling kids that that's what hard is, we're telling, I talk to a lot of coaches who say, well, we have to do these things to build mental toughness. Well, now you're telling the kid that that's what hard feels like. I don't ever tell my kids that they're tough, that they're strong. I don't ever tell them that they're fast. I don't ever tell them that anything that they do in life is tough or hard. Pat Casey was the first man to bench press 600 pounds back in the 60s. And they thought back then that 600 pounds was an impossible number. Well, now we've got Julius Maddox, who keeps, knocking on the door of 800 pounds. Is he, is he stuck at 787 because too many people have told him that 800 would be impressive? What if we had all just lied to him and told him that, 900 is the standard. If you're not repping 900, you're weak. He probably would have gotten a lot farther thinking that that was an expected marker of development. That's why, strong kids, fast kids, etc. Like athletes usually happen in little clusters. Right. You get a group where everyone has the same expectation, even if it's ill-informed, even if it's outrageous.
Where does so for example, I'll use a good example. This is a good example. After I was watching an NFL team, went to their preseason. After practice was over, I watched the quarterbacks go and run probably about 6 to 8, I would say 60s or 80s. You know what I mean? I wouldn't say they were all out. I would say they were probably about 75 to 80%. Like where does that level of conditioning help an athlete? Meaning, the guy, look, suicides to kill people in basketball just to kill them doesn't make any sense. Does one suicide all out make sense? You know what I'm saying? Where they're getting high capacity, one level of obviously 5 is you're just trying to kill them, right? So where does that play into the development of the level of conditioning in their sport, and is that needed?
I have never encountered a practice either. I used to be on a high school football staff as well. I've never encountered a practice where I felt like, our best use of time right now is some gassers.
Right.
I've never found myself in a circumstance. Again, I used to work for the NFL. My very first job at the NFL was intaking practice footage. And I've never seen a football practice, all 32 teams. I'd be sitting there watching live the feeds coming in.
This wasn't them doing gassers as a team. This was individual athletes working themselves to gain. So this wasn't a coach going and saying you need to go and run gassers. This was individual athletes feeling, for whatever reason, they needed to be in a certain level of condition for what they were playing. So and should that, and if that's the case, should that be done at the beginning of practice?
I would. It's the same sort of thing, though. I would say I've never seen a circumstance where if you have energy and you have time, that's the best use. I've never seen a circumstance where that's the thing moving you forward.
And then my other counter on it is that this is just.
I would say like
I do the same things that you do, but I'm going to give you my other counter on it. I've never seen a power lifter be able to block a defensive tackle in the NFL, right? And do it over and over again, even though they would be much stronger at lifting weights than that person. So, like, where does the athletic movement and the level of condition, the ability to do things obviously explosively and fast, versus the ability to do things over and over again, right? Where does that come into play? Because I think that's the hardest thing for coaches. Derek, correct me if I'm wrong. Like, where do you do like for example, with my youth athletes of football, we follow kind of Tony's program with this with respect to an extent with sprint-based football, where we'll do a couple times a week, 2 to 3 sprints, ball out 10 to 20 yards before practice. Basically at the beginning of practice, they knock out that maximal effort, whether it's with a change of direction, whether it's a flat sprint, whatever variation it is, but to knock it out, to be able to develop the speed over time, right? But that's always the question that, like, when you talk with football coaches or you talk with basketball coaches, right? Or you talk where that's where they begin to say that their pushback is. And I think if you even talk with NFL coaches, that would be some of those guys, that would be that level of pushback. Obviously, some guys will be like, "Hey, you're the speed strength guy. Whatever you say we do, right?" But if you get them behind closed doors and then they're in the conversation and things change, or they start to fail, then they start to ask those questions, right? And the other thing that I thought with it was TCU, right? Is very sprint based football, and they're very successful. They went to the national championship. Speed was their thing. They got the doors blown off 50-7. Obviously, me watching it, Georgia was much better physically, athletically, to TCU. But those are the things that happen within real life, things that happen within sports when coaches are talking to each other. And we don't want to default to what some basketball coaches runs kids till they puke and gassers, or a football coach does that. But we also want to make sure that they know that they're getting the development the right way, and it's not just random. That's my biggest thing. That's not just random.
Right. It's so as to like the athletes doing that work.
Right.
That is an acknowledgement that they feel that they are unprepared. So start there. They feel like they're unprepared. So they want to do something else, and with their, again, they don't have frontal lobes. So they're not, like to go, well, an athlete wants to do this.
Right.
Yeah, again, look at how they choose to show up on picture day. Like we shouldn't be trusting that judgment system. But you go, okay, so like realistically, does that athlete, number one, does that athlete know what their strengths and weaknesses within their sport are? Right? The athlete knows that they're behind the 8 ball. They're not performing to the level that they want to. It's kind of like a kid, that same athlete, it's a good indicator of that same athlete might have bad grades, right?
Yeah.
Like, does that athlete, the athlete with bad grades, how many times do they go, you know what? I'm going to go home and study more. Like, I'm going to go ask the teacher for help after school.
Right. Gonna do the extra.
That self-directed conditioning is probably equally helpful to the classroom as it is to their development as a player on the field. Because they're not, I've never, 1,000+ kids at this point, I've never seen a kid lose because they were less conditioned. I have had, I've got a thing up of, my track coach would complain about our national champion long jumper being out of shape. He beat everyone else in the country by 10.5 inches.
But he's out of shape.
But the track coach was like, oh, but he's out of shape. You know what? But he needed the elasticity in his foot and ankle to hit that jump. There were a lot more quote unquote in shape kids who couldn't hit any of the shapes needed to jump 25.5 feet. So, number one, like, define your terms. Number two, I've seen plenty of teams where, if you want to say it's basketball, well, would running one suicide or one gasser be the way? Let's just, in a vacuum, you got time to do one thing. Ask your basketball coach, because the time at which you do it doesn't really make sense. It doesn't matter. So you're saying, like, if a kid ran down the court and changed directions, okay, so do a fast break drill. Do one fast break drill. Get, one kid coming down the middle, two kids. Yeah, it's the same thing, but now you've added skill and decisions and a ball, and now you've added stakes and intent. What is the kid going to learn that's going to help him on your next game from that suicide? Nothing.
Right.
What physical adaptation are you going to make? Because he's not going to get faster from it.
Nope.
It is going to cost, it costs fatigue. And not just fatigue, It costs elasticity. It costs bounce.
Right.
It's wear and tear on those shins, on those knees. So you're stripping tread off of this tire. What for? It doesn't make the car drive any better. So at worst, or at minimum rather, you are adding, marginal stress and getting nothing in return.
Well, it's because that's what guys just always did, they just followed suit. Like, oh, I guess this is what I'm supposed to do, right? Like, because I played basketball, we ran, sideline to sideline suicide, whatever.
Also
par for the course.
Also, like, how many times I always ask coaches this. I always say, and again, I like right now I got 9 teams, and I'll ask every coach on their staff the same question. I've never had the same 2 answers to the following 2 questions. I like to ask them on different days, completely disconnected scenarios, in case I ever need to have this conversation. Who is your toughest kid? Who is your best kid? You can throw a third one in, which I have gotten. Again, I've had a state champion be the name answered 3 years earlier. A state champion is the answer for the next question. Who's your softest kid? Again, it's the cat's kind of principle, right? Like,
but also, coach, like, I look at that and it's like, well, define soft, right? Because everybody has their own definition of soft, right? Or what are we looking for, right? Like, what do we, because everybody's terms are different. Everybody defines it different. Like,
who's your most effective kid?
Right.
Who's your most effective kid? I have never seen a case in which an honest coach has said.
Honest. I like how you threw that one in there, coach.
Honest.
That's key. Honest.
I've seen many cases where a coach who wasn't really paying attention.
That's another one.
Said, it's sort of like talking about like the Bulls in the 90s. People are going to say like, well, who was the toughest? Well, depending your definition, Michael. But there were dudes out there that
Dennis Rodman.
But Dennis was never the best player on any of his teams.
The best rebounder. That's it, though.
But
right? The best.
But you're like,
he would be the best guy for clickbait nowadays, right? Like he'd be viral every week.
Yeah. But like the Golden State Warriors are never going to tell you that, like, Draymond is the reason that they won all the rings, and Draymond is the key. Draymond is a nice accompaniment if you have Steph.
Correct.
Right.
Like that that guy who just gets out there and works and just throws his body around with reckless abandon.
For the good of the group, you know?
That dude doesn't learn to do that unless that dude, like, the classical definitions of tough are normally kids who lose a lot.
Yeah.
If you really want a tough team, lose. Go lose. It's the easiest way to assuredly develop tough kids. Whoever, it's the Junction Boys. Whoever's with you at the end of, a season of hell where you've gone 1-11, the kids who show up for the first day of, off season, that's your toughest kids. But the kids who quit or transferred, those are probably your better kids. The kids who had a higher expectation are your better kids. Your toughest kids know there's only one route for me to show value, and it's to, just eat crap without second guessing anything. Just attrition. Can I survive attrition? Yeah.
Right. They're your soldiers. Those are your ride or die guys. Like, they're going to show up every, you know what I mean? Like, it's the end of a long season. And then the first question is, Coach, when do we start? Look, our season just ended, right? Like another year where we were done before Halloween. I had those guys, right? Like, Coach, and we start lifting. It's like, buddy,
really good all the way up until you get handed your walking papers.
100%. Like, thanks, buddy. I'm glad we have a lot of these guys.
Yeah, there'll be kids who keep in touch with you when you're at the next school. Like, there'll be kids that teach you life lessons, but they don't win you games. Like, that's what we call. I like to say, like, toughness is a cookie coaches like to give themselves. Yeah. Just anything that you like, you say is tough, and anything that you don't like that rubs you the wrong way, any mild irritant, you say is soft or whatever. But the reality is, the most effective kids are typically they're kids who, their expectations are, again, oftentimes so high that they're hard to coach because they will refuse you from time to time. Like, you have to lay out a plan for them to buy in because they have options.
Okay,
correct.
Like,
that makes a lot
especially
of sense.
This day and age, they have options. They don't have to. They see what other teams are doing on social media,
and they'll bring it up.
In my day, I'm 38. In 2004, 2005, when I was still in high school, like, I didn't know the name of the coach at our rival school. I didn't know anything about them. Until I knew their colors and maybe I knew a few of the kids, but they lived one neighborhood over.
Yeah,
and I didn't know nothing about what they were doing. I could tell you everything about what we did in our building.
Now
and
these guys,
anything.
it's funny because that's one of the first questions we ask. You put on that film on Monday about your opponent, and you're like, all right, we're playing so and so. Like, who knows somebody? Oh, coach, I played this with them, or hey, we played that. Like, okay. Like, all right, because they all know. I mean, Dave, you deal with it in youth the same way. I would imagine that the kids all know, who's where and what teams they're on, and if the kids don't, Dave, especially at your age, right? The parents definitely do. Oh, so and so's on this list, right? Or so and so's here. It's crazy.
Yeah, and they might be in like we had kids who'd get recruited and tampered with and whatnot, but even still that process was so much slower. Someone would come, I remember literally, like, I was starting both ways as a sophomore coming off of a season where our team sucked, but I had shown a little something, was starting to get some recruiting attention, and I was at a city league basketball game, among things that don't really happen anymore. I was at a city league basketball game in a middle school, and a coach from an opposing high school showed up to my city league basketball game and stood out in the parking lot and came over and said, Mom and Dad, I think what we can do for your son, and we were like, wait, yeah, and it was weird. It was like, you tracked us to a rec league game for a
Right.
sport that I just play for funsies.
Whereas now that's the norm.
Yeah. And that coach,
I mean,
he had to pick who was he going to proffer in a parking lot. You know, he couldn't come to my game and go to the next kid's game. You know, like he couldn't go to the rec league baseball game across town to try and get some other big tall kid over there. Like he could only shoot so many shots at so many intervals. The whole process was just slowed down, and you realized that you had to sit with it longer, which led to probably some better decisions because you didn't go off just knee-jerk emotion. You had to go with like whatever decision kind of calcified and stuck around at least till the end of the season. But that's, I mean, the kids today are just a reflection of the environment that we have built for them.
Right.
Everything that they do is logically motivated by what we do to them and do for them. You know, so like that, and that's where, like, as a coach, you have agency. You know, if you're just the kind of guy who's going to say, well, kids these days, well, what are you going to do? Hope for, kids tomorrow? They're probably not going to trend in a direction that you like if you haven't liked what's happened thus far. You know, like this is the first sort of still the early wave of cell phone, social media, head down kids. Just wait to see what's happening with more post-COVID children. Like, if you're not taking any accountability and sort of like finding a way to, grab the steering wheel and navigate these seas for yourself, like you're probably not going to like it, as time goes on.
Mm. Yeah, I think what's interesting is that you have a subsector of athletes and coaches that are trying to figure out what's the best methodology without knowing all of the data that would lead them in the right direction. Now, obviously, there is data, but they need to research that data. And a lot of high school, I'm sure college, they have a lot more of that information. But at the high school level, I don't think there is a lot of guys that have that information unless you have a strength and conditioning coach that does have that kind of information. And I think that makes it difficult. But what I thought was so interesting about that was it was two quarterbacks, the starter and the backup, and at the NFL level, that felt that was important for their preseason development to do that. I thought that was really interesting because all the stuff that's out there, and it was not a coach that directed them, nor a strength and conditioning coach, nor did anyone stop them. And I wonder if there's some sort of like with athletes, and these guys were both the best athletes on their team in college in the NFL. They're probably not, but in college. Yeah. So I just thought it was very interesting that they thought that was necessary.
Yeah. It probably just speaks to them wanting to have agency and wanting to take accountability.
And they're not young. Right. They were were at least in their late 20s. So right. So that's the thing that I thought was very, very interesting because they are elite level athletes. Mm-hmm. And they thought that was something that they needed to do. No one is going to tell them. I also wonder if it's something that, let's say, they've done their whole lives, right? Mm-hmm. And made them feel comfortable with the fact that they would perform at the level that they expect themselves to perform by doing that. Like, mm-hmm. There is, to me, and I'm not saying it may have zero to do with them being better or worse or anything like that. But there's a mental component to me, to elite level athletes, that they feel they need to do certain things, whether it's right or wrong. But
they're programmed that way.
Yeah. And I wonder, I do wonder, and this is not even like, it's not even a question that like has to be answered or anything, but I do wonder from the mental component for an athlete, that they need, do they have to cover certain things in order for them mentally feel like they're in a right state of mind. The thing that always comes to my mind is the whole drill sequence that Dak Prescott used to do from a quarterback standpoint. Yeah, the hip, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure he feels like he needs to loosen up his hips and all that kind of stuff. Does that make him a better player in the game? No, maybe not. Maybe not. But for him, whatever it does is it makes him feel like he's right and ready to go. Right,
puts him in the quote zone, right? Like, you know, each athlete. I used to feel that way. You know, for every, and this is just a weird, like every game, irregardless, first play, kickoff or kick return, I felt like I had to fall down, like in order to like, all right, it's game time, right? Like whether I got hit, whether I made a hit, like something, I needed to fall down, hit the turf, hit the grass, and then it was like, all right, we're good to go, right? I don't know. I just think it's kind of you're almost like almost superstitious type. You're almost starting to get into that world, right?
Yeah,
you know,
it's pacifying neurosis.
Correct. Yep. It is.
And to that point, like, so you take those two quarterbacks who did extra,
right?
Which again, I would say, like, the physiologically, like, what did that do for them? Nothing.
Right.
But psychologically, it provides them with a feeling, which is probably placebo, but it provides them with a feeling of agency, and it provides them with the idea that this is me exerting control over my physical state. Now, like, for me, I have it at several different times in my life. I've done things like, I used to be really big into barefoot running, and I would run like 7 miles a day.
Barefoot?
In like the 5-finger shoes.
Oh, the 5-finger shoes. Yeah. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
But I was gonna say, shit, coach, we're on a different, holy shit.
Yeah. But like, did it make me? Or then, like, I did kettlebell challenges and stuff for a while. Right. I've done long fasts. Like I've done 5-day fasts before. And
you,
you're amazing.
I'm not in very good shape right now. Do not compliment me. But
that's because you've been fasting for 5 days in a shot. Like, holy hell.
But the sort of point of that is, like, sometimes people go like, oh wow, like, what is that? Why did you do that? And I'm like, normally when I look at my life and go, when did I do that? My business wasn't going well.
Yeah, something was going on.
I wasn't in a relationship. Like, I was between jobs. I was broke. Whole lot of things, a whole lot of large. I felt very little agency within where I was. So
okay.
So it's like a fighting to have some sort of control over a process that you don't have any control over. And so you just arbitrarily, you give yourself this thing that is like a declaration sort of your own discipline.
Okay.
And but now here's like the wicked part there. So I would say, like, I don't think that made any like the activity there was arbitrary. It didn't make any difference. It didn't do anything physically for them. However, it shows you that, number one, they are looking beyond their coaches for some means to get better.
Yeah.
Right.
Agreed.
A better, use of their time probably would have been, go watch game film. Go watch your game film. What do athletes not want to do? Go watch on repeat the mistakes that you made. That's one of the hardest things for an athlete to do. That's what athletes do not want to go watch their mistakes. Go break down and confront your failings. They don't want to do that. They want to have a Rocky montage for themselves.
Yes, they
do. Because it's easy. There's a quote from a guy, Max Schmarzo, hard work is lazy. And it's that idea that, like, you're pacifying the story for yourself. You're saying, like, you feel like you need to do something because you haven't done enough because you're not ready. So you feel like you have to do something. So the easy default is, well, I'll just go run. I'll just go take off on a run. Now, at a certain point, you hit like a runner's high. So it starts to feel good. You're releasing endorphins. Well, that's a stress management thing. That's not physically, nothing's happening there. But you know what people don't do? You know, like even those two athletes that you're bringing up.
Yeah.
It's self-directed. And the self-directed part is a big, like for that to have any value, it had to be self-directed. A coach will hear that story and go, ooh, that's what my guys need to do. And they gather everyone up and they go, you know what we're going to do? We're going to go be tough like those two guys. I'm giving you both, you know, I'm giving you all, you know, 4 more gassers at the end of practice. Now you've taken the agency that athlete was craving. You took it away from them. Like now the meditative, the exercise and discipline, it no longer belongs to that athlete. So now you're putting tread on the tire and breeding resentment all at the same time. Like you've undermined even the argumentative worth of that exercise. You took what could have been meaningful, even if it was, again, placebo, and you stripped it away to give the control to you as the coach.
A good coach would just point out and say, hey, so-and-so was, those guys were out there. They felt they need to, you know, to do that to get better. You as an athlete need to figure out what you need to do to be better. I think that is definitely I think there's value to that. I like. I'm not saying the running the sprints, whether it's watching film, right? Well, it could be watching film.
I think approaching the athletes and telling them, like, you know, hey, what can I do? What can I do to help you get better? Is there anything else after practice that you need? Do you want more time in the facility for you to come in and do some extra work? Do you want that time? Not me giving you more. Do you want, you know, hey man, do you want me to leave the door unlocked to the film room? Do you want me to stay a little late so that you and the guys can get a group in there so that y'all can watch film? You know, like,
hey man, I'm gonna roll the jugs machine out after practice. If you guys want to get catches, like I'll leave the ball bag over there. Just let me know when you're done so I can bring it inside.
Yeah, doing, you know, something where they can take ownership over their own process. And it's hard because most coaches, you know, like coaches inherently, people who are drawn to coaching, they want a lot of control.
Oh yeah.
You know, like, and they like their routine and they want you to like their routine. And, you know, like that's a real hard thing for coaches to deal with, is that like, even when you know the answer, sometimes like your job isn't to give it.
Right.
That's a thing, like over the last few years for me, has been like I started challenging myself, like how much volume can I pull out of our program and our system? How little can we progress with? You know, and when I say progress, I mean like at the rate that, you know, I got a 126-pound wrestler right now who's benching 255 as a sophomore. But like, how can I make things like that work? You know, can I get guys jumping, you know, 36 inches and running, you know, splits that should put them at an electronic 4.4? Can I get those things happening with 5 to 10% less volume? And then if I figure that out, can I do it again? Can I do it while having fewer like, can I get more kids to show up voluntarily because they enjoy it? How can I facilitate like that environment that keeps the kids coming back? A big way is I have to be able to stay ahead of the kids. I have to be able to show them their advancement. I have to show them enough. You know, it's like being a parent in a weird way, where like you have to show them that unwavering belief and expectation in them, and you simultaneously have to show them like enough care that they want to perform for you.
Correct.
But like if you're proud, if you're too proud of everything too early, then your opinion no longer matters. And if you're too hard and too cold, then they no longer, care about you at all. So it's, they have to feel that investment in you without it being about you. Like, and to understand, like, at the end of the day, again, they don't have their frontal lobes, they're kids. There's certain things that you have to be more understanding of, like the whole, like the standard is the standard. How we do one thing is how we do everything. Standards are taught. And anytime there's teaching, there's going to be hiccups. There's going to be things that get lost. There's going to, like, teaching cannot happen without mistakes. We learn the most on the precipice of failure or success. It's right on the edge. If you firmly if you go out and you beat the crap out of someone out on the field, your team doesn't get much better. Correct. If you go out and you lose close or you win close, like, losing close is probably the best way to learn anything. Apply that. Just failing close is the most eye-opening experience. Succeeding close, vaults you forward, but it doesn't teach you near as much as failing close. And then failing or winning or failing by a lot teaches you very little. Right. So by that same context, like, your kids are going to step over the line. Your kids are going to do things that you don't like or you're not proud of necessarily. It could be from an execution standpoint. Like, sometimes form that you don't like is going to happen. Mm-hmm. But it has to happen because the kid has to be pushing enough that some sort of technical breakdown starts to happen. That because the kid has to be pushed into a state where they're experimenting essentially with their coordination and with their tactic. Right. And when the kid fails, they're going to learn what that failure feels like. When the kid succeeds, if they fail enough and they succeed enough, then they learn to feel that ever so slight difference in between the two actions. Doing it right and doing it wrong, if you only ever do it right, like, so much is learned by contrast. If you only ever do it right, then you don't know what it feels like as you slip into doing it wrong. You don't know that it's wrong until it's way wrong.
Makes perfect sense. Coach, it's been phenomenal having you on. Website for OVR. Make sure we let everybody know what that is.
Oh, go to OVRperformance.com. Again, we've got VBT devices. We've got sprint gates and jump devices. We've got a few other accessories, broad jump mats, things like that. All of our stuff is extremely affordable. It doesn't have subscriptions. The price you see on the website is the price that we offer it at and the price that you pay. You don't have to call to get a quote or anything. If you're with a school, we're in thousands of locations, including thousands of schools across the country, across the planet at this point. If you need to do things through a PO, we can handle that. We got you. Reach out to OVRperformance.com, info@OVRperformance.com, at OVR Performance on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, all that kind of stuff. Plenty of resources out there. Go check it out. Technology, should be affordable. Gamify your training. Go have some fun with some tools.
Awesome stuff. Great information today. I really enjoyed talking with you. I learned a ton, and we will see you soon. By the way, I just purchased myself a coach's pack from OVR. So
awesome.
Yep. So
I can see that come across my.
I purchased about a half hour ago. And while we're on, I
might have already
had it in my cart since yesterday. Anyway, and I was like, let me just do it while I'm sitting in front of my desk. But yeah, it's so I'm looking forward to using it. I'll definitely give you my feedback, and then best of luck, and we'll talk with you real soon, Coach.
All right.
Thanks,
Sounds
Coach.
good.
Appreciate the time, buddy.
No problem.
Have
Thanks
a great
for
day.
having
All right, bye.
So,
That was a great pod, dude. Really, really informative. Like I learned a ton.
So insightful.
Yeah. Yep.
That's what's great about doing these days. The more guys we talk to and you see the different approaches to every, like, like we always say there's a million ways to win, you know what I mean? And develop and do all these things. Like, I just think for us, the gaining of the more and more knowledge, like some of these guys we talk to, we might not use what they use or do what they do specifically, but like, it's all like, we take it all in and can use at least something, or even if they to, you still learn something else. So I think it's really cool to talk to some of these guys that have been in it, that have tried different things, do different things. You know what I mean? And then look, you're getting you just purchased something from him based off of like what you saw and what you liked. So it's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think that and I'll let you guys, it's been a long pod. The thing that I like,
could have sat there for another 2 hours just listening to going through it all, dude. You know what I mean? Like, just
I think the bottom line is that one of the things that I do truly agree with that is that all of the stuff that from the development of an athlete works together, and you have to figure out what adaptations you need to do for each athlete, which is not easy, by the way. But that's really how it like all speed development, you know what I mean, without adaptation to what you're doing, you'll reach plateaus. Now, like my biggest thing is that like, there is a very important to understand a difference between is a kid developing because he's getting older and bigger and stronger versus things that you're doing that help, because the truth is, and this is why a lot of coaches don't change, is that your kids are going to get better because they're going to get older.
They're going to get better
no matter what you're doing.
Like the kid Dave, like I look at it
like
like
this,
right?
Like, hurt, obviously.
Correct. But look, and even if that kid goes in the weight room and does like the bare minimum and just does what we tell him, next year he's probably going to be bigger, stronger, faster, just because he's a freaking year older. So if I can help him now mentally, right, by playing him a little bit software on specialties, right? If I can help him with that aspect of it, maybe he now goes and attacks this offseason, and rather just give me 50% in there, he gives me 75% in there because, I played a little bit. I had a little success. Or like what coach was referred to, worked the other way. Like maybe he got his ass kicked physically because he's going against older kids. And now he takes that and he's like, all right, I got to get stronger. Now he works even harder in the weight room. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think talking about the mental side of it is a real big part of it too. You know what I mean? Like you can be mentally exhausted from whatever it is, you're being put through and all those kind of things. Like that's the part of the game now that's so different, right? Like the focus on so much of that.
Well, I also think, agreed. I think that the reason why I brought that up is the reason why I brought it up was these guys are pro athletes, right? And they felt like that is it's not a gotcha. It's a, hey, these guys felt that this was important.
They needed it.
For their development. Who am I to say that them not doing it is going to make them play better by them not doing it, right? So
even if I give them the numbers, the analytics, and the percentages and say, dude, if you do this, you're going to be less ready, they may still say, Coach, this is what I do. This is how I do things. And like, I need this here to go do it. Even if you show them the numbers, like, hey, it's going to take away from it mentally, like that's what they need to do to get in the quote zone. You know what I'm saying? I think that's part of it. I used to be like that, dude.
I was like that. In high school. I definitely 100% was like that. In college, I was like
high,
that.
high school, like lifting before a basketball game, like a hard football lift, and then go play a basketball game at night. Like I needed to do that. You know what I mean? Like I felt so much. If I didn't, like if we had an away game and I couldn't get a lift in after school before I didn't feel right going on the court.
Right. And I think that there's no way to measure that.
No.
And it's
Absolutely
called
not.
the placebo effect, but
Right.
there is a component to.
I enjoyed that part of it.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's a component to it. Like
I felt like it gave me an advantage, a mental advantage over my opponents. Like they didn't work out before this game.
Right. And that's another part that is.
You can dive into that.
I know. I'd like to dive into that because that's something he talked about it really well. The agency of an athlete, like control. You want control
I love that.
over what you're doing, right? Because coach probably has control over most of what you do.
Right. I need something within us to take ownership. You know what I mean? Like, I need like, hey, you're the safety. I'm giving you the ability to make this check, right? Oh, right. Coach is letting me do that. Dude, I know what it's supposed to be. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
But just for him to have that, like, it takes it to a different level. I really like that. Like the agency of it. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's I think that's a cool way of looking at it,
It's almost like a little like mind game. Like maybe game's not the world, but you know what I mean? But just like that mental side of like giving somebody control or, like you said, to take ownership of something where, most times you're not because you're being told as the athlete, you're doing this. This is what you know what I mean? Like, okay, now my 2 cents matters a little bit.
Right. Well, that's definitely exactly. My 2 cents matters a little bit.
Right. And when people feel like it matters or you're contributing to something, like you take it to a different level.
There's no doubt about it. I think that's it's very interesting because like we go down rabbit holes of training and development and things that can make athletes better. And we also have to understand that there's things that athletes, as they get older, not when they're young, because they don't know enough, I would say, for the most part, about these kind of things. But you want to make sure that athletes do have agency, great word, over what they do.
It's them. It's their body. It's their life. It's their world. Like you gotta, you know what I mean? Like I understand as a young person, right? Like just look about how you develop as a person in general. Like, as a baby, you need your parents to literally do everything for you. And then as you progress, like that gets taken away until you now make, it's your decisions. Now you see a direct correlation to what's happening in your life, your decisions. Like that's all part of it. So for you to now get ownership of something, like, yeah, it's going to take it to a different level.
Yep. And I think there's a push and pull to it. And there's a pod I think you posted on that I'm not actually a huge fan of the guy, but he does have some good things. I just think that he's a guy that wasn't a very good athlete himself and wants everybody to take sports less seriously.
Less serious?
Yeah, well, you posted about something that he had on. But he always talks about youth sports. This, and he has this woman on that talks about it too. That like, but basically that parents shouldn't be trying to motivate their kids, or you should ask them questions and blah blah blah. Like I think it's a push and pull. I think there's part of it that's good, but I think overall, like the big thing is figure out the right things that can help them. Okay, and sometimes it's a kick in the pants. Sometimes a kick in the pants. Sometimes it's question. Sometimes you have to motivate them. Sometimes you have to back off. Sometimes they probably need a push. Sometimes the best thing you do is say absolutely nothing. Okay.
Absolutely.
It's
parenting.
It's parenting. And one of the things that I think is big to do is to point out what things parents should maybe want to think about. Think about this. Think about that without prescribing parenting to people. That's a big thing.
Because I feel like you kind of when you have some of those conversations, Dave. Yeah. Right. Like when you, I think now, because when you do that, most parents take like offense to that. Like, don't tell me how to parent my kid. That look, that's like that's where coaches screw up a lot because it's all in their delivery, right? And how they word it and the approach, like, or even the timing of it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, or the situation, don't single up, you know what I mean? Like, there's certain things that, just parents are very temperamental at all times because you're talking about their prized possession, right? Like the one thing that should matter more than anything in their world. And that's just how they're going to always look at it. It is very hard as a parent to separate from whatever it is, right? Like even in your occupation, dealing with your own child, right? Like say you're a doctor and you have to treat your kid, right? Or you're officer and now your kid screwed up or did something, whatever, like a teacher with your kid as a student, to take that and separate yourself is very, very difficult, right? Because that's your kid at all times. So the approach has to be right.
Is meeting people halfway. So
yes, or hey, let's try this.
As a coach, you're less emotional about the decisions with your team. Okay.
Yeah.
Even though you might love the kids and you probably do love them, you love working with them, you're less emotional because it's not your own kid.
It's not your kid.
Right. The parent is more emotional because it is their kid.
Their kid. Like, this is everything.
Both parties have to kind of meet halfway, meaning you as a coach, even though you feel, okay, I don't know, this kid should be work harder or tougher, whatever it doesn't even matter. You have to understand and have empathy for the side that the parent is coming from. Figure out if you could kind of get there with them. Now, a lot of times you don't, but you can get there with them to get common ground. And then the parent of the athlete has to figure out how they can look a little bit from what the coach is seeing as far as not just in their athlete, but their responsibility to the whole entire team, right?
Absolutely, because it's not just about your little Jimmy, right? So like little Jimmy is a part of something bigger.
Right. So there's both to it. There's like you need to understand that they're coming from this side, and then the parent needs to understand the coach has a responsibility and he's doing what he thinks is best for the team.
And I think that's really hard. A lot of parents, especially in football,
both sides is hard.
Right? Where like, hey, Jimmy should be playing, but it's like, they just don't it's the same, hey, teach so-and-so how to block, right? Because Billy just got up. And it's like, well, there's another side to that. What if you're Billy's parents? You know what I'm saying? Or whatever. Or you're you're yelling to block. Like, how do you think those parents feel, right? Or there's just, it's really hard for parents to understand that bigger picture of, because they just want what's best for their kid, when in reality, that might not be what's best for the team.
Right. And that's there is that.
That's not going to change, dude. You know what I mean?
The coach doesn't have to be empathetic to it, but I think it helps you.
Oh, it definitely helps.
When you make a decision, just knowing what they're thinking, right?
Right. It's also like,
as a coach, you could say, hey, you know what? I know how they're feeling about it. And
because I've been there.
It's not what's best for our team. And I have to be willing to deal with the fact that it may not be with us.
Right, but I understand as a parent, like if that was my kid, I would think the exact same or whatever it is. Obviously, having a kid myself now with another one on the way has put me in a different. Oh, buddy.
Oh,
what's on fire?
All
Yeah.
right, fine. I'll see you later, Derek.
Holy shit. Go get it. Okay. Let me know.
All right.